Hey, this is Nick Jain, CEO of IdeaScale, excited to bring you another episode of Fireside Chats with Chief Innovation Officers. Today's guest is Charles Araujo, the VP of Innovation and Product Strategy at Symphony AI, a global enterprise leader in generative and predictive AI. He is an authority on digital transformation and the digital experience. In his role, Charles focuses on visioning new AI products that Symphony AI can develop to create value for their enterprise IT customers. He is also the author of The Quantum Age of IT, a book on how IT services organizations are changing. Thank you so much, Charles, for joining me today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. So let's jump right into it. Can you share first? Can you share how Symphony AI's applications are transforming industries like retail, financial services, and manufacturing? I know you guys are a big organization.
We're a very large organization, and Symphony AI, I'm proud to say, it's a new role for me. And I'm proud to say Symphony AI is definitely on the sort of cutting edge of applying AI across a bunch of different verticals. So I won't go into all of them. I work in the enterprise IT business unit or division, and but our other divisions focus on in the financial services, mostly fraud detection and that sort of activity. And the retail, we have sort of a cognitive landscape. I forget what they call it actually, but it's an entire platform that helps do things like customer insight and supply chain and all of those different elements. So really across the entire organization, our fundamental ethos is this integration of generative AI and predictive AI. So predictive AI is all about using AI to look at historical data to build models to predict future activities or actions. And then of course, generative AI is that whole piece. And most organizations right now are sort of in one or the other camp. And our organizing ethos really has been about bringing them together. And in doing that, we think creating a ton more value. And you see that pretty much across all of our different sectors that we serve. So in the case of enterprise IT, we're actually very excited about the fact that our roots are really in service management and workflow automation, and sort of taking that to this whole new level with some brand new agentic AI platforms that we're building. That's really what I'm mostly leading, and we're very excited about what that is. We think it's going to be truly transformative in the enterprise space.
Perfect. My own background is in math and physics, so I'm very familiar with the predictive AI world, but over the last 3 or 4 years, I've had to start learning a lot about the generative AI world. So it's cool to run into an organization that's playing, got a foot in both worlds. Next question is actually kind of a more specific to what do you do, right? The term VP of Innovation, Chief Innovation Officer is reasonably new in the corporate world. So what does that mean at Symphony AI, and what do you do to drive value for your organization?
Yeah, it is. It's actually there's sort of a long story that we probably don't have time to get into it, how it evolved. But the way I describe it really is that I sit at sort of the intersection of product, sales, marketing, of really understanding where the market is going and how do you kind of bring all these pieces together, right? In a large organization, you got all these moving parts, and innovation, I think people a lot of times think of innovation in this like R&D type setting, this big picture, and that is very much a part of it, particularly in a research type setting, or if you're a really big company and you have this whole group that you can spin off to do that. In our case, it's very pragmatic, right? This is about how do we create solutions, first and foremost, from the building blocks that we have or the expertise that we have that have the ability to truly transform our market or to be transformative for our customers, and to be continually trying to break out of the box of this is how we've always done things. And so for me, that translates into everything from the kind of having an incubation lab sort of mindset where we're actually constantly going out, looking out 5 years or so into the future about what's coming and how can we start building a pipeline of product that might be, and this is experimentation and that sort of stuff, all the way down to how do you then, from a strategy standpoint, activate that from a pricing perspective and a partnership perspective, and what are the specific elements of the product roadmaps that we want to elevate. So really what that means is, for me, is I'm sort of focused on that big picture, and then I work with our product management team to bring the product side of it to life, with our marketing team to bring the go-to-market part of it to life, and with our sales team to bring the actual on-the-ground interaction with customers to life, to sort of bring all these pieces together. So it's a lot of fun, and it's but also a little harrowing because you're trying to strike this balance of, I'm people. When I wrote my first book, and for most of the last 10 years, people called me a futurist, and this idea of where I like spending time thinking about the future, and this job is really challenging me to connect those dots. And it's like, it's great to think about the future, but what does that practical reality look like today?
I cannot imagine needing to sit at the intersection, as you said, of marketing, sales, product. Yeah, that would be a lot of stuff going on, and you kind of have to be able to, yeah, as you said, maybe not be a futurist, but manage all of those moving forward at the same time. That sounds tough. Let me ask you actually kind of a hard question. So I run an innovation software company. All my customers are trying to innovate, and one of the questions that they struggle with, and they often ask me about, is okay, how do we measure innovation? Right? So we've created a innovation team, an R&D team, a chief innovation officer. But A, what does innovation mean in a very palpable sense? And number two, how do we measure it? So at Symphony AI, how do you guys measure innovation? Is it time to market? Is it ROI? Is it number of products launched? What is it, and how does it create value in a measurable, palpable way for your organization?
I think this is the money question, and it's incredibly difficult to answer and to measure against. So if anyone has this wired, I'll be on the receiving end. Send it over. I will tell you, I think we're absolutely still figuring this out. As I said, this is a new role, not only for me but for the organization, at least for this division. And so I think there's some parts here that we're trying to sort out. But I think you nailed it, right? The challenge here is you have to look across this entire pipeline, and you really have to instrument across all of it. In the end, there's really only two things that matter. And that is, are we driving new revenue? Are we driving the ability to execute from a sales perspective? And are we then, the second part of that is, are we creating an experience for our customers that is delightful and remarkable and differentiated in the market, that they want to engage with us and go do something around that in terms of working with us, right? So at the end of the day, those are the ultimate markers that we're looking at. That said, as I mentioned, we need to sort of instrument across this entire innovation pipeline, and that starts at the ideation side. So certainly one of the things that will become a critical factor for us as we really get rolling here is, how many new concepts, I would say, right? As far as looking at that pipeline, we want to start by, are we generating new ideas that we can test in the market that are viable, even if we choose not to pursue them, right? I think that's a key part. And then as we sort of move through the pipeline between that point and go to market, right? What are those other kind of touch points? But in the end, I think the ultimate barometer has to be, are we satisfying customers? Are we filling a need in the market? Are we growing our TAM? And are we delighting them as we do that? So, ultimately that's where what it all comes down to.
Well, let me ask a kind of a difficult follow-up question. You said ultimately, if we're delighting our customers, if we're growing our TAM, does that mean it just boil down to revenues? Are we selling more in a private sector organization, or is there a more intermediate metric that you can use short of our customers are happy, they're buying more from us?
So, I mean, I think there's no way to, how do I say this? I think there's no way to avoid the fact that at the end of the day, every company is measured by
Sure.
revenue, right? So that's our ultimate barometer. The question really is that revenue is by definition a lagging indicator, right?
Yeah.
And
Is there
so,
an intermediate metric exactly between
so
now
like
and
for right now, we have this new product that we're just in the early stages, and so right now I'm measuring progression as an example, right? One of the measures that I'm looking at is, am I finding people that when I introduce this new concept to them, that they're going, oh wow, I really want to learn more. I want to progress through this process. And yes, you could think of this as like a sales cycle, but I'm not really measuring this from I'm qualifying the account. That's not what I'm concerned about at this stage. I'm looking at, are they looking at this going, you are filling a need in the market that nobody is filling right now, or that you're doing it in a unique way? That's a progression marker for me that is very important, because that tells us we're on the right track. And we're doing that across customers, we're doing that across partners, right? Where we're looking for those indicators that we are in fact doing something innovative, right? That we're not just another run, whatever the word is, right? Or that it's just because we're cheaper, just because we have one feature set. I think, and maybe that's the big difference, right? I always have Clayton Christensen ringing in the back of my head, right? About, are we just doing this incremental innovation, or are we doing something that is truly transformative in how we approach it? And so our barometer is, are we doing something transformative, and what are the indicators of that? But the hard part is, it's like reading tea leaves. It's never I don't think it's as, oh, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, that means it's happening.
Sure. So two quick comments. You asked if anybody's got a secret they should email you. There's actually a reason why there can't be secret sauce. Number one, there's a philosophy that if you can't measure it, it's not real, right? In the world of science, if you can't measure it, it's outside the realm of science. Number two, there's actually a really cool organizational law called Goodhart's Law, that the moment you start measuring something, it stops being useful. For example, if you measure your innovation team by the number of new features they launch, guess what? They're just going to launch a ton of features, and that may not actually be necessarily innovative. So you have this conflict between science saying you have to measure it and organizational psychology saying the moment you start measuring something, humans start racing towards that metric at the exclusion of the stuff that is perhaps really valuable.
No, there's no question about it. And I mean, I think, I mean, not just here at Symphony, I mean, with many organizations I've been a part of, I come from a service management background way back, and I hated those metrics for those very reasons. Is that, I actually think it's a very flawed mentality that you can't manage what you don't measure, which I get it on one level, but that converse is so true, and the unintended results of it, which is why I'm a huge proponent of systems thinking, which, by the way, I do apply in the same. So if I boil down my overall ethos of how I approach this, which isn't what you asked me, but I'll be the politician and ask the question I want you to ask, right? I look at this as at the intersection of systems thinking and design thinking, right? Design thinking, putting the customer first, looking at it from their perspective, and then systems thinking, looking at all the inner workings of the system, and not just in one isolated way, but to understand all the pieces, how they hang together and how they work. And when you put those together, I think from a delivery standpoint, you get some really powerful results, but it's also an innovation platform, because if from an innovation standpoint, you're looking at both of these, it forces you to broaden that perspective and keeps you out of that exact trap you're talking about.
I agree. Yeah, no, and again, my natural inclination is towards go measure everything. I'm a scientist by training. I love that. At the same time, practically in the business world, or in the human world, I should say, when you start measuring something, people start gaming the system either intentionally or unintentionally. So just jumping ahead to the next question, and this is kind of a very common question nowadays, right? Like AI is everywhere. Everyone's starting to adopt it. People are struggling with it. So what are the challenges that your customers or your clients see when they start implementing AI-driven solutions in 2025?
Well, I think hands down the biggest challenge with, so again, let's remember that our focus is the enterprise IT space. So our primary buyer or customer is a CIO, and that's our domain. So keep that in mind. But when I look at this, the challenge we have with AI, and this is really for us a go-to-market challenge, right, is that there is so much noise and static. There is so much news every day. I one of my jobs is to stay up what's happening in the marketplace. I have easily 25 newsletters that I read every single day. I mean, it's a multi-hour process every day just to keep up with the flood of information that is coming out around it. And so AI is this blanket term that not only legitimately does it mean a whole bunch of things, illegitimately people slap it on a bunch of stuff that really isn't AI. And so for an economic buyer, an IT buyer, an enterprise buyer, it's really confusing. I don't envy them trying to sort through all of that. So that's the first big thing. The second big thing is we vendors collectively, and I'm really, really trying to make sure that we Symphony AI don't fall into this, but collectively the market is just, we're horrible at just throwing all this hype out there, making this stuff sound so simple and like it's going to be this magic elixir, and then not being able to deliver on it. There's a new study that PagerDuty, I think, just commissioned that shows that something like 75% of enterprise execs think that agentic AI is going to be transform everything, and only 22% of IT people think so. And that speaks volumes, because the people that actually have to do the work of making this stuff work know exactly how hard it really is. And not putting any shade on Salesforce, but they had the Super Bowl commercial that was just, it was horrible, because it just it created all these bad caricatures of what AI is, and we have executives seeing these commercials and trying to process this, and they just can't make heads or tails of it. So if I'm a CIO today, the thing that I'm looking at is being laser focused on my business strategy, laser focused on how I can leverage technology specific or broadly, and then AI specifically, to drive some form of value for the organization in a measurable, quantifiable way, and then deconstruct from there, instead of doing the other way around, where you start with the vendor and you start with the tool and say, okay, what can I do with this? You're going to end up in just the abyss if you do that. And so I think that's the most important thing you can do and the greatest challenge that they're facing.
So I want to just react to something you said at the front, that there's so much hype out there, and everyone is talking about AI. The funny thing is, when this all started about a year and a half ago, somebody suggested, hey, we should change the name of our company from IdeaScale to IdeaScale.ai or Idea AI or something. We've been around 15 years. Yes, we have AI, now built into our tools, which pretty much every software company does, either predictive or generative. But the funny part, the only thing that we resisted the urge, but we did buy the .ai domain just so somebody else couldn't. But it is fun. You're absolutely right that a lot of software companies are falling into the trap of saying agentic AI or generative AI or whatever form of AI will solve all solutions. But getting these solutions, number one, these solutions tend to be point solutions, they're not human level yet. Maybe they will be in 5 years or 10 years. They're not human level yet. And number two, they do require integration or access into all the other systems. So even if you have the greatest agentic salesperson, this new AI still has to talk to your Salesforce, your HubSpot, your finance team in some way. And those integrations, though, as your enterprise IT people probably know, are hard to get working right.
Yeah,
So okay.
I mean, there's no question. Sorry, go on.
No, please, after you.
Well, I was just going to say you're absolutely right, and I think it also speaks to the other issue, right? That I think of AI as the tip of a two-legged pyramid or whatever, like this, and underneath it, underpinning it, there are two really fundamental building blocks. And it's your data architecture, which is your entire data schema, your all the data within your organization, and then your processes, right? And that at the end of the day, AI operates on these two things, right? It's using your workflows and processes to take action. It's using the data to inform that. And if you don't have those clear, straight, then nothing is ever going to work well. And I'm very proud that what we're developing actually can help a little bit with that. But there's that is still the issue, and this is why I'm a former industry analyst, and so I made my living by looking at the market and being critical of it. So I can't help but be critical, and I'm hoping that's going to, in this role, make the products that we deliver better because of that. But we have to always be very, very wary of the fact that my history is, right, I was an analyst, and before that I was a practitioner. I own this stuff. And so when you bring those two things sort of to bear, it's like I'm very sensitive at making sure that we're delivering solutions that actually work. And that means, we have to sell the stuff. I get it, but it means trying to dispel with this hype and just really zero in on the pragmatic, how can we deliver value?
Yeah, I have one story I'll tell at the end on this, which is kind of funny from the market analyst perspective. Let me jump into the last question I actually have for you, which is, okay, we have all these AI tools. Some of them are hyped, some of them are real, some of them deliver value, others don't. But how will AI affect, specifically for your enterprise IT customers, how is AI really going to be innovative or counter innovative for the enterprise IT organizations?
So I think first of all, the answer to that question extends far beyond what we're doing. I think that AI, I'm actually much more bullish, maybe at least on one level than you are. I think that we're going to see exponential growth and development in the domain over the next 2 to 5 years, and it's going to be really remarkable. The limiting factor is going to be the fact that, as you I'm sure know very well, that large enterprises change very slowly, and the organizational change, the change dynamics within organizations, that's going to be the big challenge. The technology, in fact, it's going to create some friction because the technology is already rapidly reaching this point where we're starting to bump up against that, where the technology itself is much more capable than I think organizations are
Yes.
in handling it. That said, I think that it is, if I'm a CIO today, I'm laser focused on how I leverage this technology to augment my team. There's a lot of focus right now on using AI to replace people. I don't think there's any question that it's going to replace low-level jobs in some cases, particularly if those jobs are, highly repetitive and et cetera. But the real power in this is not, at least anytime in the near future, is not to replace workers. It's to make them exceptionally more productive, in any variety of ways. So there's a bunch of folks out there that I think are focused on making them productive in their specific domains, optimizing supply chains, or you mentioned about having an automated prospector if you're in sales or whatever. And I think you have to be very careful with all of those use cases, but they can be done well They can be incredibly differentiating. And then where we're focused is really on sort of the other end of that spectrum, which is the productivity of all the stuff that keeps people from doing their real job, right? And taking all that off their plate. I think we're going to see, and probably about four other dimensions, right? I think we're going to see evolution across all of those. And I think for a CIO or for any enterprise IT buyer, it goes back to that same question. How do you have to get laser focused on the business value of how your organization creates value, and then very carefully pick and choose where to make those investments so that you are accentuating that and really sort of doubling down on it.
I have a kind of follow-up question to what you just said. You said AI tools will make people exceptionally more productive, and I tend to agree with that. But if person A becomes much more productive, doesn't that reduce the organization's need for person B, who's a little bit less relevant now?
I think so. On an individual basis, I think there's some truth to that. Meaning, if you are somebody who wants to stick their head in the sand and say, "I refuse to use all this goobly gop AI stuff. It's a waste of time," all you're doing is putting yourself at a disadvantage. And I think that you are going to make yourself increasingly unemployable. I think, so there's that element of it. From an organizational or from a macro perspective, I think we have a whole lot of history, a whole lot of data over time that every single time we have a major technology innovation that would on the surface seem to displace workers and create this space, what we end up finding is that we end up retraining people, we elevate the skill sets, and we apply them in much more interesting, productive ways. I do think there's a legitimate concern. I think with AI and with its progression, if I look out over, say, a 20-year horizon, maybe there's a step change here, maybe, but I can guarantee you go back and read some of the history of what people were writing at the dawn of the industrial age, they said all the same things, and it was completely unproven in the end. And so I would say right now I am open long-term. In the short term, that's not what you should be worried about.
So I agree with you on the history lesson. I would argue, probably even being more bullish, that AI has now entered an area where it's competing against us in what has historically been the special province of human beings: intellectual capacity, thinking, cognitive processing. And maybe it's not solving PhD theses yet in abstract mathematics, but there's a lot of things that human beings do that get pretty good at thinking about. So actually, just final question. Which is, okay, so we've chatted a lot about it, about a bunch of different things, both Symphony AI, AI generally, innovation. My kind of parting question is, why do you think innovation deserves to be a function within a large organization rather than something that is interspersed into throughout the entirety of the organization? Or do you not believe that?
Oh no, it absolutely has to be. I think, well, for a couple of reasons. First, I'm a firm believer, and I'm going to butcher it. There's an old thing that goes something like, if you're green, you're growing, and if you're not, you're dying, meaning that there's only two states for any organism to be in, and that is growing or dying. And so I think the investment in innovation as a cultural manifesto is an investment in growth, an investment in constant forward progress. And any organization that stops innovating, any organization that doesn't invest in innovative culture, stagnates, and then it just becomes a slow march to death. And I think you can make lots of money in that slow march to death, but it's not very fun. And which leads to the second reason why it should be just a baked in part of your operating ethos, is because it makes life more interesting. Everyone wants to be part of doing something that's innovative and exciting, and actually has the potential to have a real impact for customers in the world, to change things. There's this old axiom that, I spent a lot of time doing organizational change management, an old axiom that people don't like to change. And I say, that's not true. Just look at when, back in the day when the new iPhone would come out, right? People were lining up around the block and waiting for hours to willfully change, right? They wanted to change, but they want to change when they're in control, and when the promise of that change is worth it, right? There's something on the other end. And so innovation is the vehicle that drives all of that, because you need, and from a corporate standpoint, it takes a whole lot. Organizations are intrinsically designed to resist change for a reason, right? Because it's how we drive efficiency. And so you need an innovation engine that helps counter that in a controlled fashion, right? And so I'm a huge believer in it, and I think it has the effect of really of making an organization fun and exciting, and making sure that it's always growing.
Perfect. That was my last question, Charles. Is there anything else you want to add on as we end this episode?
No, I mean, except for I think to double down on what you said is that I am very fortunate. I've had several people when I announced that I had this job that said it's their dream job, and I agree. I'm incredibly honored and lucky to have this particular role. But you don't need a title like mine to be an innovation leader within your organization. And to your point, everybody should do that. Everyone should have that innovation or that innovator's mindset and bring it to every single thing you do.
Perfect. Thank you again, Charles, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on another episode of Fireside Chats with Chief Innovation Officers. Thank you.